Rising opposition to China's expansionism. To talk about that, we have with us Ambassador TCA Raghavan, former Indian High Commissioner to Pakistan, and he's also the Director General of ICWA, and Dr. Harsh Pant, he's Distinguished Fellow with the ORF. I welcome you both to Newsnight. I'll begin with you, Ambassador Raghavan. China has been needling various countries in different ways. With India, it has been consistently raising the Kashmir issue, even though without any breakthrough whatsoever. We are aware what India's stand on Kashmir is, and the world community recognizes India's stand. Why do you think China is repeatedly taking up this issue, even though India in its response has said that now China must learn its lessons from these infructuous attempts?
The reasons why China is embarking on this course of action really are two or three. Firstly, they have a very close political and military relationship with Pakistan, and we cannot ignore the fact or disregard the fact that the two may be acting in concert in trying to internationalize this matter. Secondly, the China-Pakistan agreement of 1963 had in fact also referred to the status of the state of Jammu and Kashmir. Now that is an agreement which we did not recognize because we hold that China is in illegal occupation of a part of the erstwhile state of Jammu and Kashmir. And the third factor, of course, is the current situation which India itself faces with China in Ladakh. I think these three specific factors have to go into any explanation of Chinese behavior. But there is also a larger explanation, and which also has some merit to it, which is a certain assertiveness in Chinese behavior, not just in South Asia, but in different regions. Your report had earlier referred to the South China Sea, but there have also been developments with regard to Hong Kong, as also elsewhere. And there are analysts who have theorized and speculated that all of this could be on account of certain internal changes in China itself. So I would say that the reasons for Chinese behavior are possibly a mixture of both internal and external factors. But the most important in these reasons would be certainly their strong political and military relationship with Pakistan, as also the fact that India and China are in the midst of a standoff in Ladakh.
Absolutely. Dr. Harsh Pant, is there any reason to doubt that China and Pakistan have been working in concert when it comes to raking up the Kashmir issue? Isn't China simply doing Pakistan's bidding for its own strategic benefit? Having said that, who is China or who is Pakistan to actually lecture us on unilaterally changing the status quo, quote unquote, as far as Kashmir is concerned? What has Pakistan done on the Kashmir which is under its illegal occupation?
Well, Pakistan has been trying to rake up this issue for, obviously we know there is a historical context to it. But I think what it has been trying to do with China now increasingly, because, that it finds itself marginalized in the global discourse. Kashmir at one point in time resonated with certain constituencies across the world. It no longer resonates anymore. India has been able to convince a large part of the international community very, very credibly that most of the problems actually lie in Pakistan's management of this issue, the way Pakistan has handled it militarily, and the militarization of this dispute that Pakistan has engendered. So what Pakistan has been trying to do now is to use China as a front in terms of raking this issue again and again at the international fora. And China has been doing Pakistan's bidding for various reasons that have been just explained, but largely also because China itself is also bereft of friends. If you think of Chinese friends today, you think only of Pakistan and North Korea on one hand, at the most. So clearly, as the world is evolving, India is evolving, Indian foreign policy is evolving. Both, I think China is also a bit concerned about India's rise, and Pakistan also is concerned about its own marginalization in the global discourse, where Kashmir had been its main instrument to insert itself in that discourse. So what we are witnessing now is that frustration that is being reflected time and time again when you bring this issue knowing fully well that this will be rejected by the international community, that international community has taken India's side on this issue for a very long time and will continue to do so, that largely the issue will remain a bilateral matter between India and Pakistan. But China has to do it because Pakistan wants China to do it. And also Chinese own interests vis-a-vis India at the moment are in a frame where it wants to use this issue to keep the pressure on India intact, given that other areas, given that the global discourse has moved away from China and a larger sort of rallying against China, there is a larger constituency of countries that are increasingly shaping up and increasingly supporting India's role in the world, as well as taking India's side in a wider dispute that is emerging with China.
So, Master Raghavan, if the international community is backing India's position on Kashmir and not that of Pakistan, which has only got support from China, then what does this say about India's deft diplomacy and that of Pakistan?
Well, I don't think this process has come to an end. I think the Pakistani attempts to raise this matter internationally will continue. So I would say yes, the matter has been handled well so far.
But it's not cutting ice with anyone. It's been several decades.
It is not cutting ice with anyone, that is true, and I would say it has been handled well so far in the international framework. But certainly the fact is that we have to see that these attempts come to an end. Because, as I said, this is not just a question of Pakistan raising the issue of Kashmir. We also face a very difficult situation with China. So it is in our interest to see that this matter does not gain any traction. There is no sign just now, and I would reiterate this, that this matter is going to gain any traction. But the quicker we move to see that these irritants are resolved, the better it would be.
Dr. Pant, Mark Esper, the US Defense Secretary, has hit out at China, saying that China is arm twisting, that its behavior or conduct is not consistent with international norms. This was also said in reference to the situation along the line of actual control in Ladakh between India and China. Do you agree with what Mark Esper believes and what increasingly the international community believes, that China is simply bullying its ways? You would remember what the Prime Minister said when he visited Ladakh. He said that the age of expansionism is over and the future lies in fact in the age of development, or the age of development is here and it's here to stay.
Well, Munmun, it seems, it is quite interesting if you think about the China-Pakistan connection. And, at one point in time, it used to be Pakistan that clearly was seen as a rogue state. Today, it's also China that is increasingly coming up as a roguish state in the international system. Look at the way it is behaving when it comes to basic international norms, the way it is using certain international institutions to its advantage, the way it is completely destroying any normative and treaty-based arrangements that it has with other countries, including India, and to ride roughshod over any credible demands from the other side. So whether you're looking at it in the Indian context, whether you're looking at it in the maritime context of East and South China Seas, whether you're looking at its behavior in Hong Kong, Taiwan, and in Xinjiang, I think we are looking at a country that at one point in time was trying to convince the world that its rise is going to be peaceful and very orderly. Today, I think that consensus is completely broken down. No one buys into that argument that China is going to be a peaceful, China's rise is going to be a peaceful one, or that China can possibly be a responsible global stakeholder. And I think that's the issue staring all the major powers in the international system. And I think they are grappling with this sudden ferocity with which China's aggressive intent is coming to the fore in terms of managing how do China's rise. And that's why you see, whether it's the US, whether it's our partners in the Indo-Pacific, the way the discourse is evolving and the trajectory of that evolution is very, very significant, because in a very short period of time, we have seen considerable consensus on not only the source of the problem, but also how important it is for like-minded countries to get together and make a credible alternative or shape a credible alternative vis-a-vis China. And therefore, I think Mr. Esper is quite on the mark here that, look, China is is not going to be a responsible stakeholder. But the question is, can the US in its present state emerge as a leader where it can lead this coalition of the willing, or where it can lead this coalition of like-minded parties? And I think that's where conversations seem to be moving at this point.
We'll take that point further, but before that, Ambassador Raghavan, Mike Pompeo had told US senators recently that the tide is turning against China. Is there a lot of evidence of that already?
I think it would be premature to come to that conclusion. It is true that in terms of opinions around the world, there is a growing unease, as was earlier stated, with a pattern in Chinese behavior, and in particular its assertiveness where it comes to established norms of international conduct. But I do not think we should underestimate either the confusion which the United States projects at this moment, and B, the economic and commercial clout which China has in different parts of the world. So I think it would be premature to come to the conclusion that there is a sudden reversal in international opinions and the United States is now in a position to lead that reversal. I think...
but we are already looking at the United States, for instance, expanding curbs as far as technology companies of China is concerned. India has, of course, done that, banning 59 apps and also their clones later. And we are also reviewing, FDI that is coming in from neighboring countries, we say, and a lot of decisions on that line are taking place. Besides that, we've seen what Australia and the UK have done. They've thrown out Huawei from their systems, and then there is closer coordination happening within the Quad as well.
Well, that is true, but the fact is the United States is going into an election this year, and as I said, there is a sense that a clear picture of how of the United States position on this will emerge, will possibly be only after that election. And secondly, I think it's useful to remind ourselves from time to time that we deal with China as an immediate neighbor. Unlike the United Kingdom or unlike Australia or unlike many other countries, I think our postures on China have to be resolute, but they also have to take into account the fact that it is an immediate neighbor. We deal with it both on continental borders as also in the maritime domain. So therefore, our position has to be always refined, taking into account our own national self-interests.
Dr. Pant, Mark Esper says that the best way to deal with China is to multilateralize efforts against Beijing. You've earlier spoken about an alliance of sorts, and he, in fact, Mike Pompeo has in the past spoken about an alliance of democracies and a global combat or a global compact against China. Do you think that these are some of the ways a coalition of countries, a coalition of as many countries as possible coming together to stand up to China?
Well, there is actually no other alternative, because the multilateral order as we have come to know it for the last several decades has virtually it seems to be on its last legs. I do not see how you can think of even WHO or WTO or UN Security Council, even G20 for that matter, working under the present circumstances. We know in the last few months how all of these platforms have virtually failed, even on issue which was a non-traditional security issue like COVID-19 pandemic. I mean, most of these platforms were unable to come to a consensus on one of the most vital non-traditional security threat that this world has ever faced. So clearly, I think the multilateral order as it is evolving is getting fragmented. And in that fragmentation, we have to find some order. And that seems to be the only ordering principle, seems at the moment that you have certain like-minded countries which are fundamentally are democracies, and they are looking at it from the perspective of preserving some of that normative consensus that existed in the last few decades. Now, that cannot be the sole criteria, but that is emerging as a very, very important criteria of how probably a fragmented multilateral order is going to emerge. And therefore, for all these countries, you were mentioning earlier, even UK was talking about how democracies will have to come together and find an alternative to Huawei's 5G. and develop the next 5G, next 5G technology. So clearly you have countries that are thinking out loud now, something that was unthinkable a few months back. So we are entering into a phase where new thinking is emerging as to what sort of a multilateral order we need. And that is, I think, Mr. Esper's remarks, as well as Mike Pompeo's remarks. And we should also look at his speech that he made a few days back at the Nixon Library, which was, I think, one of the most significant speeches that we have heard from Americans, where he's talking almost of this idea that unless Communist Party of China goes away, we cannot have a stable world order. So clearly there are concerns about the institutional framework that is emerging out of China, that is not only internal to China, but China is trying to externalize it, and how other stakeholders that have a stake in the extant order might want to preserve that order. And I think that conversation that major leaders are having at the moment points us in that direction, that perhaps democracy, like-minded, as a democratic framework, like-minded countries can get together and generate some consensus on some of the fundamentals that will be needed to tackle this emerging global order. But at the moment, we don't see that consensus. There is no consensus at the moment, but perhaps it can emerge as this conversation moves forward.
But would you say that there are signs, Dr. Pant, that the growing belligerence of China, which China has now come to be increasingly associated with, and people are speaking out loud and not as much in hushed tones as they were doing in the past, is all that backfiring and likely to backfire further?
I think so. I think that too much aggression, and especially when you look at Chinese diplomacy, this whole wolf warrior aspect to its diplomatic conduct has generated so much backlash that it is becoming very difficult for China to rise above that that negativity. Just imagine even a few months back, China could easily convince certain countries and could preclude them from possibly forming a coalition against China. Today, that seems to be a tall order for China to do. In fact, China has clarified. Chinese behavior, in fact, has clarified for a lot of countries what the stakes are. Now, there are challenges going forward, but I think that consensus that is emerging can be dangerous, potentially dangerous for China, given the climate that its own actions have engendered in the Indo-Pacific, in India's neighborhood, as far as India's boundary is concerned, and the larger international system. So this negative backlash that it is generating is going to be considerably problematic for China going forward. But as Ambassador Raghavan pointed out, these are still earlier days, and China's economic clout is potentially very, very significant, and that can't be discounted.
Well, thank you, Ambassador Raghavan and Dr. Harsh Pant, for having joined us on Newsnight tonight.